It's 20 years since Hong Kong's return from British colonial rule to China. And next week, President Xi Jinping will be here to swear in a new Hong Kong leader. Carrie Lam's predecessors were often accused of being Beijing's puppets. Will Xi manage to escape that charge? Carrie Lam, Chief Executive-elect of Hong Kong, thank you very much for joining us on the BBC.
No, not at all, pleasure.
Hong Kong is about to mark the 20th anniversary of the handover from the UK to China, and I know spectacular celebrations are planned. Can you tell me, in your view, what exactly Hong Kong is celebrating?
Well, Hong Kong is celebrating successful implementation of this very unprecedented principle called one country, two systems. And Hong Kong as a city, as a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, is as robust as ever in many of the respects. And I think this is something to be celebrated.
We'll come back to the question of robust as ever, because it's one on which there are many opinions. But first, there are 7 million people in Hong Kong. 1,200 only get the opportunity to vote, and you won the votes of 777. How can you claim to have a mandate to be a bridge or any other kind of communication between the people of Hong Kong and the central government of Beijing when you only have 777 votes?
Well, I don't think it is a question of a number. The question is about legitimacy. And as you all know, this election committee by itself is formed by a much larger electorate representing broadly all the sectors in society in Hong Kong. So I have pledged that as part of my governance style, I will be engaging all sectors of the community, especially the young people. I'm a very honest and straightforward person, so I will confess that in recent years, there have been that feeling of disconnected, that some people, especially young people, are feeling that they are not connected adequately with the government and with our own country. So this is something that we all need to reflect on. As a government, of course, we need to do more in engaging young people.
Although your votes were in the pro-Beijing and pro-business section, not in the pro-democracy section. And, you know, many mainland voices were raised supporting you. So it's very difficult for you now to escape that charge that you are yet another of Beijing's puppets.
Well, that is a perception. Of course, now that I'm a chief executive and haven't been a politician for 10 years, I know perception is important. But to say that I am just a puppet, I won this election because of pro-Beijing forces, is sort of a failure to acknowledge what I have done in Hong Kong over the last 36 years for the people of Hong Kong.
But it is true also that in opinion polls, before the very limited election, you were actually behind your rival in opinion polls consistently. So if there had been a more democratic vote, you would not have won. Is that a fair comment?
I don't think it's a fair comment because we don't have a popular vote. Going to a polling station could be very different from indicating your preference in any opinion poll.
You're going to be sworn in coinciding with the 20th anniversary. When you think back on these 20 years, how does the reality measure up to your 1997 expectations?
I'm very much an insider. I have been in the government for 37 years, half of that before the reunification and half after the reunification. So I can now tell you in very clear terms that I just don't see a very major change before and after. Life goes on in Hong Kong. So at the beginning, I used the word robust. A lot of things remain as robust as ever. The rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, and by the way, is even better than the pre-1997 because final adjudication now also takes place here, whereas in the past, it went back to the Privy Council in the United Kingdom.
How do you answer then those who say that one country, two systems is simply not working well? I mean, I've heard you twice now say it's robust, but to quote you, the last governor of Hong Kong, the last British governor of Hong Kong, Lord Patten, he says Beijing has been steadily tightening its grip on Hong Kong's windpipe. The former American Consul General, Stephen Young, says one country, two systems has become quite hollow. There are obviously different positions on how robustly one country, two systems
Well, there are so
working.
many commentators in this world, and they have their own view. If I can also draw your attention to recent remarks by the current incumbent US Consul General, who made this very clear statement that he feels that one country, two systems is working well in Hong Kong. But I always challenge people making the sort of comment that you have just described. Give me concrete examples.
Okay, here's an example.
What is the tightening and where is the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong?
So here is one thing that seemed to have concerned many people in Hong Kong, the disappearance of Hong Kong publishers at the end of 2015 to appear in prison cells inside mainland China thereafter. The disappearance earlier this year of a Chinese businessman who has completely vanished, but disappeared from the streets of Hong Kong. Is that kind of thing okay? Is that one country, two systems?
No, that sort of thing, of course, will give rise to some concerns and anxiety. But at the end of the day, one has to look at facts and evidence. Do we have the actual facts and evidence in front of us to prove beyond doubt that that was the act of interference, that was an act of the mainland authorities enforcing mainland laws in Hong Kong?
Do you have any other explanation for what happened? Well, either in the case of the publishers or in the case of that business tycoon?
The Hong Kong police force have been working on this case and trying to collect evidence and come to a view. But unfortunately, without the cooperation of the people involved, it's just not possible to go to the actual situation and come up with a statement on what has happened.
So do you think it's possible that those Hong Kong citizens are afraid to speak up about what happened to them? Do you think that's a possibility?
I don't know. I don't know, but of course, I always have this to say to people who have fears and worries that they have to trust the rule of law and they have to come up and tell people the actual situation.
So how many Hong Kong citizens need to disappear before you start to draw any conclusions about what might be happening to them?
I think that is not a fair question. We are not here to quantify that sort of allegation. But I can tell you and assure the people of Hong Kong that as the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, apart from actual incidents, if there are fears, if there are anxiety and worries of the one country, two systems principle not being upheld, if there are worries that there have been undue interference into Hong Kong affairs which should come under a high degree of autonomy, then the Chief Executive has to reflect those sentiments and speak up on behalf of people.
Yeah, so would it be fair to imagine that you might have a conversation with President Xi which goes, please make sure that no security services from the mainland operate undercover on Hong Kong soil? Will you be having that conversation?
Well, I think the President and all the mainland officials and the Chief Executive and the Hong Kong SAR government are obliged to uphold one country, two systems and all the provisions in the Basic Law.
So is that a yes? You will have that conversation?
Well, I will be very honored to have a conversation with President Xi on occasions, hopefully on the 1st of July. And I have said in public that it is a duty of a Chief Executive to reflect truthfully, candidly, and comprehensively to the mainland leaders what Hong Kong people feel.
Sorry, I'm still not understanding. Does that mean that on this issue, where there clearly is concern among the Hong Kong people, that you will be saying to mainland authorities, including President Xi, we do not want mainland security services to be operating undercover on Hong Kong soil?
I think it is not fair to sort of adopt such a selective and prejudiced approach in explaining the Hong Kong position. But what is important is the principle.
Let's talk in detail about the operation of one country, two systems, because we've seen recently, over recent months, Beijing, or the Chinese Parliament, the standing committee thereof, interpreting Hong Kong's mini-constitution, directing Hong Kong's judges. And we saw at the end of last year, thousands of lawyers marching to condemn that as interference in one country, two systems, interference in Hong Kong's autonomy. Do you agree that that is interference?
I don't actually see that interference at all. But what is for all to see is 20 years after the reunification, the judiciary is operating very independently. Highly distinguished judges in the common law jurisdictions are happy to continue to sit on the court of final appeal.
So those thousands of lawyers protesting, they're all wrong?
I just could not recollect the actual incident that you described. But people have different views because this is, again, a core value in Hong Kong. We are a very free society and we respect people expressing their views freely and orderly.
Okay, so this brings us to another point, calls for independence or self-determination. If the Chinese parliament was to say that freedom of expression in Hong Kong did not cover calls for independence, what would be your position on that?
Again, that we'll have to look at the law, what the law says, because Hong Kong prides itself on being a place that upholds the rule of law. You have to look at one country, two systems as an integral whole. What is the purpose of two systems if it is not put in a context of one country? The country respects the history and the realities of Hong Kong, and in order to ensure that we maintain prosperity and stability, has crafted very cleverly, in my view, this one country, two systems. So it's not a question trying to put one country as if opposing Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong is an inseparable part of the People's Republic of China.
You think so? What if other Hong Kong citizens disagree? What if they wanted to call for independence?
They disagree in a form of being an expression of personal opinion. Then everybody could have a view. You could condemn him and so on. But whether that expressing a view constitutes an offense, then we have to look at what the law says.
What's the answer?
We'll have to look at what the law says, because right now we do have a few cases before the court about this oath-taking, whether this is in accordance with the law and so on and so on. So it's not quite appropriate for me to deal on the details.
It's interesting you take that view, because obviously you just said that Hong Kong's a place that values its freedom. Yeah. Most societies that value their freedom in the 21st century, they'd say somebody calls for autonomy, somebody calls for self-determination, somebody calls for independence. That's a question of freedom of speech. And it is surprising to hear you say that that's something that has to be considered, rather than say, yes, it's a matter for free speech, it's simple as that.
Well, we have to look at the context and the circumstances. I cannot just right away agree with you, because the calling for independence have to be put into the context of what the law says as well.
I suppose the question here is what China says, because it's a stark fact that in other parts of China, you know, one could mention Xinjiang or Tibet, calling for meaningful autonomy, let alone self-determination or independence, is something that could land you in jail for a long period of time. Now, can you promise the people of Hong Kong that never in your tenure will someone go to jail for calling for autonomy, self-determination or independence?
Well, I can promise the people of Hong Kong that we will abide by the rule of law in Hong Kong.
So that's a no, you can't make the promise.
How can you promise when you don't know the actual situation, when you don't know the actual legislation in Hong Kong, and to give a sort of perpetual situation answer? I don't think that is a very fair question to ask.
Some mainland legal experts are already saying one country, two systems should be abolished if Hong Kong fails to defend national security. And others are saying that foreign residents who call for independence should be expelled. I mean, this is potentially a real problem for your administration, isn't it?
No, I would find it very difficult to agree with that sort of comments. We can only act in accordance with the law when that sort of situation arises. It is not for an individual to say that people with that sort of view and opinion, no matter how wrong that view or opinion is, you cannot condemn or put people into jail because of that view or opinion.
Let's move on from political and legal questions to economic ones. There is a generation coming up who have the biggest stake in your administration succeeding. What did they come to you and they say, there's not a lot to celebrate for us in this 20th anniversary. We can't afford a home currently. It'll be a generation, possibly even a lifetime before we can. Mainland young people are taking the best jobs. We can't vote. What have we got to celebrate? What do you say in answer to that?
I want really to give our younger generation hope in the future of Hong Kong. So in terms of economy, the hope lies in diversifying Hong Kong's economy. So it's not just financial services, tourism. I want to put a lot more attention on innovation technology, on creative industry, so as we could create quality jobs for the people, for the young people. Secondly, of course, I know housing is important. Home ownership is important. I want to give young people that sense of hope.
And yet, this generation, some of whom in 2014 spent nearly 3 months on the streets protesting for democracy, they might look to you and say, but you've been there for the best part of 40 years. You've had the social welfare job, you've had the housing job, you've had the development job, and now you're saying you're going to sort this out. They're going to say the very root of the problem is the politics, because Hong Kong is a stitch-up between the rich and the rulers, and we don't get a look in.
Well, that's not true. In a mere 5 years' time, the government has increased spending on social welfare by 71%,
And yet,
introduced
the
two
wealth
cash
gap
schemes.
is worse than ever in Hong Kong.
Well, the wealth gap happens in most advanced economies because it is about relativity.
One last question for you. You once echoed a comment, I think, that there's already a place reserved in heaven for you. And I know you're a practicing Catholic, you take
Yes.
your faith seriously. What makes you so confident that you are on the side of the angels?
Because I do good things.
Carrie Lam, thank you so much for joining us.
No, not a pleasure.